This is the exact spot where Carlie's body was found. And while we remember Carlie, the investigation itself changed the way we react to emergencies and missing children locally.
On February 1st, 2004, 90 million Americans were sitting in front of a television, nachos in hand, waiting for the Super Bowl to kick off. Nobody was going anywhere that night, which is exactly why what happened in a quiet parking lot in Sarasota, Florida, is so hard to wrap your head around. Broad daylight, a public road, a security camera running the whole time, and in a few grainy seconds of footage, an 11-year-old girl in a red t-shirt and a pink backpack is simply led away by a stranger, and the rest of the country doesn't notice a thing. Her name was Carlie Brucia, and what happened to her over the next 4 days would expose a phone call that broke a case wide open, a coded letter written from behind bars, and a decision made by the state of Florida just 8 days earlier that never should have been made. Before we get there, you need to know who she was. Carlie was born in March of 1992 on Long Island, New York, and moved down to Sarasota, Florida with her mother when she was still young, though she never really left Long Island behind. Every summer, every Christmas, she made the trip back up north, because Christmas with her family there was, hands down, her favorite time of year. Back home in Sarasota, her life was full. 6th grade, choir, a cat she adored, a serious Jennifer Lopez phase, the kind of girl who thought a trip to the mall and a good hug could fix just about anything. She was close with her mom, Susan, her stepfather, Stephen, and her little half-brother, an ordinary, happy childhood that was supposed to have decades left to unfold. On the afternoon of February 1st, 2004, that's exactly what it looked like. Carlie had spent the night at a friend's house, and by early evening on Super Bowl Sunday, she was getting ready to walk home, less than a mile away, to watch the game with her family. Her friend's mom called Susan first to check in. Susan didn't want Carlie walking that stretch alone, so her stepfather Stephen got in the car to go pick her up. The streets were empty. Almost the whole city was inside, glued to the pregame coverage. It should have been the most unremarkable errand in the world. It wasn't. Stephen drove the route and found nothing. No Carlie on the sidewalk. No pink backpack. Just quiet houses and porch lights. He circled again. Still nothing. And that's when the feeling every parent dreads settled in. About an hour later, a 911 call came in. "My daughter is missing," a woman's voice says. "She's gone. We can't find her anywhere. I've called all her friends." And just like that, Super Bowl Sunday in Sarasota turned into something else entirely. Officers retraced her steps, talked to friends, walked the exact path she would have taken home. They brought in a bloodhound named Ruby, using one of Carlie's pillowcases to give her a scent to follow. Ruby picked up the trail almost immediately, steady, nose down, until she stopped, right behind a car wash not far from where Carlie was last seen. And there, the scent just ended, like she'd been lifted straight off the face of the earth. Here's where it gets stranger. That car wash had security cameras, and somewhere on that footage was the answer to exactly what happened to her. Investigators secured the property and sat down with the owner, who confirmed the cameras were motion activated, covering several angles of the lot. Officers pulled the tape and worked through it camera by camera, hoping for anything useful. The first two showed nothing but an empty lot and a quiet road. Then they hit the third camera, positioned at the back of the property. Time-stamped 6:21 p.m., the exact window Carlie vanished. A young girl walks into frame. Red t-shirt, blue jeans, pink backpack. Seconds later, a man appears. Around 5'8", dark hair, a tattoo on his arm, dressed in a mechanic's uniform with a name badge too blurry to read. A few words pass between them. Then he takes her by the arm and leads her away. A handful of seconds. But it told investigators everything. Not a runaway, not a misunderstanding. An abduction, caught on camera, in broad daylight, on one of the most watched nights in American television history. That footage went public almost immediately, and it went viral before viral was even a word people used for anything like this. Every network ran it, looping it during and after the game itself. People watched it in sports bars, still half-dressed in their team jerseys. The Super Bowl forgotten entirely. It spread from inbox to inbox, message board to message board, in an era before social media even existed to carry something like that. Within hours, that man's face had been seen by millions of Americans. Carlie's father, Joe, pointed out to reporters that people had been standing just a few hundred feet away when his daughter was taken, and not one of them had seen a thing. A $25,000 reward went out, and the tip lines lit up almost instantly. Investigators went back to the footage one more time, rewinding it a little further, and found something they'd missed the first time. 3 minutes before Carlie appeared on camera, a pale yellow 1992 Buick Century station wagon pulled into that same lot, circled once, pulled back out, slowed down, and turned back in. Deliberate. Now they had a face and a car. And somewhere out there, someone knew exactly who both of them belonged to. More than 800 tips poured in within the first couple of days, and one name kept surfacing from callers who had no connection to each other at all. Joseph Peter Smith, 37, originally from Brooklyn, an unemployed mechanic and father of 3, renting a room from a local couple in Sarasota. The moment investigators pulled his history, it got dark fast. At least 13 prior arrests going back to 1993. Everything from drug possession to prescription fraud to cocaine charges. He'd been charged with kidnapping once before and walked away acquitted. And in the weeks leading up to that Super Bowl Sunday, he'd violated the terms of his probation again and had somehow been released anyway. One caller stood out. A woman who'd once worked alongside Smith said she recognized him instantly from the footage. Not his face, but the way he moved. The exact way he used to grab a tool off a bench. She watched him reach for Carlie's arm on that screen and said it looked exactly like that same motion. Her husband called it in right away. Detectives went to Smith's address with backup. Nobody answered, but a neighbor confirmed someone was home. Since Smith was on probation, officers reached out to his probation officer and requested they come to the scene, then waited. While they waited, a woman pulled up to the property, one of the homeowners whose spare room Smith rented, driving a pale yellow Buick Century station wagon. Officers brought Smith outside to talk. When they showed him a still from the footage, his answer said everything without quite saying anything at all. He looked at it for a while and said it looked like him, but that it wasn't him. He offered to let them verify where he'd been that night. He agreed, calmly, to let them search his room and his car. Nothing tied him to Carlie right away, but in his room, they found a mechanic's uniform with a name badge on the chest. In his car, drug paraphernalia, enough to arrest him on the spot for a probation violation, even before anything more surfaced. Then the case hit its first real wall. While officers were still processing the scene, the husband of the Buick's owner showed up, and what he said stopped everyone cold. His wife had gotten it wrong. He was the one who normally drove that car, and when he checked it, things inside had clearly been moved. The back seat had been folded flat. He handed the vehicle straight to the sheriff's office for forensic testing without a second's hesitation. Just like that, whatever alibi Smith thought he had collapsed, he was read his rights. He asked for a lawyer, and with Carlie still missing, the investigation shifted into a faster, more desperate gear. That's when someone else walked into a police station and changed everything. On February 4th, a man asked to speak with the FBI. His name was John Smith, Joseph's brother. He told agents right away the two of them weren't close, that their relationship had been strained for years. But he also said that on the night Carlie vanished, Joseph had called him around 8. The next day, John and his girlfriend watched the news, and when the surveillance footage came on, they both recognized him instantly. Not just his face, but the way he walked. Joseph had had back surgery years before that permanently changed his gait. There was no doubt in either of their minds. Later that same night, Joseph had shown up at John's front door, seeming like he might be under the influence of something. Still in his mechanic's uniform, but his usual sneakers were gone, replaced by a pair of boots John had never seen before, brand new by the look of them. Joseph didn't say much. He just asked if John wanted to talk about something. John said no and shut the door. The next morning, Joseph showed up at John's job, washing his hands over and over even when they were already clean, and told his brother he might need to leave the state soon. John told agents plainly, if his brother was guilty, he'd probably take it to the grave, that he would never get a clean confession out of him. His advice was to stop waiting for one and build the physical case instead. Investigators actually reached out to NASA to help enhance the footage enough to read that name badge. It came back clear. It read Joe. Then the case broke wide open, and it started with a phone call John made because he thought he was already being recorded. After Joseph was jailed on the probation violation, he was allowed a private visit with John and their mother. 90 minutes later, John walked out visibly shaken, telling officers his brother had come close to confessing. Really close, but hadn't said the words outright. Officers took him at his word and let it go. No wiretap on John's phone, no follow-up questioning of the mother. That decision would turn out to be one of the biggest oversights in the entire case. Because that evening, John picked up the phone and called the FBI himself, believing his line was already tapped. The moment he said he was guessing they'd already heard everything and asked what he was supposed to do now, agents on the other end realized something enormous had just happened. Joseph had told his brother exactly what he needed to tell him, and John, believing every word of that conversation was already on record, was calling to follow up. 3 agents were in their cars within minutes, heading straight to John's house. That's where John finally told them the truth. Joseph had confessed, not cleanly, not the way you see in a courtroom drama, but he'd apologized, broken down, and when John pushed him directly and asked where she was, told him they had to find her, Joseph gave him a location, a stretch of road near the interstate, behind a church. Officers moved immediately. In the early hours of the morning, in thick brush at the edge of a field behind that church, they found Carlie Brucia. She had been missing for 4 days. If this story is hitting you the way it's hitting us, go ahead and hit subscribe now, and drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from tonight. We read every single one. Now, here's the part of this case almost nobody expects. One thing was no longer in doubt after that night. Joseph Peter Smith had taken Carlie Brucia, and what he'd left behind, in evidence, in his own words, was about to make sure everyone knew it. The evidence that followed was the kind prosecutors dream about, and defense attorneys lose sleep over, layer after layer of it, each one damning on its own, and together, completely overwhelming. A semen stain recovered from Carlie's t-shirt was matched to Smith's DNA, with odds of it belonging to anyone else on the planet, at roughly 1 in 32 quintillion. There are about 8 billion people alive on Earth right now. A number like that isn't really a probability anymore, it's a certainty. Inside that yellow Buick, investigators recovered 2 of Carlie's hairs and 7 separate fibers matched forensically to her red t-shirt. The car told a story no amount of cleanup had been able to erase. And then there was the letter. While awaiting trial, Smith wrote to his brother in code, apparently convinced the guards reading his mail wouldn't be able to crack it. He was wrong. The FBI decoded it in full. Inside, in plain language, Smith described dumping Carlie's clothes across several different dumpsters to scatter the evidence, described dragging her body to the spot where it was eventually found, and told John, at the very end, to destroy the letter and keep quiet. John never destroyed it. It became one of the single most damning pieces of evidence the prosecution carried into that courtroom. One more thing sealed it. A jail phone call between Smith and his mother, neither of them realizing it was being preserved as evidence. She urged him to say it had been an accident. His response, that it wasn't an accident, that he'd never have done this on purpose. That recording would later be played, in full, for the jury deciding whether he lived or died. The defense had almost nothing to work with. They challenged the footage's timestamp, and argued the jail meeting with his brother, arranged after Joseph had already asked for a lawyer, amounted to an improper interrogation. Neither argument gained much traction. Stacked DNA, fibers, hair, a decoded letter, a recorded confession to his own mother, and the fact that the defendant personally led police to the body, there's not much room left for reasonable doubt. Trial opened in November of 2005, nearly 2 years after Carlie disappeared, in front of a jury of 8 women and 4 men, who somehow had to be found among people in Florida who hadn't already watched that surveillance clip play on a loop for months. From the opening statements, it was clear this wasn't a case that would be won on courtroom theatrics. The prosecutor laid it out methodically. The footage, the DNA, the fibers, the coded letter, the recorded calls, the fact that Smith himself had personally led investigators to where Carlie's body lay in the dark. The facts did the talking. John Smith took the stand, and it was one of the more uncomfortable stretches of the entire trial. The prosecutor actually had to ask the judge to declare him a hostile witness, a legal move that let her cross-examine her own side's witness more aggressively, because he kept being evasive. John was facing his own legal troubles at the time, drug and robbery charges of his own, and he later admitted to being under the influence of crack cocaine when he testified. The defense used every bit of that to try to undercut his credibility. But here's the thing, none of the physical evidence needed John Smith to be believed. The DNA didn't need him, the fibers didn't need him, the recorded call with their mother didn't need him. His credibility could be picked apart 6 different ways, and it wouldn't have changed a single fact sitting in that evidence file. The jury didn't take long. On November 17th, they found Joseph Peter Smith guilty on every count: kidnapping, sexual battery, first-degree murder. In the sentencing phase, They voted 10-2 in favor of the death penalty. Under Florida law at the time, that recommendation didn't need to be unanimous. Carlie's stepfather, Stephen, said afterward that he'd expected the verdict to bring relief. It didn't, not really. He said it still hurt just as much. The only difference was that he finally felt like Carlie had been heard. Carlie's mother, Susan, wasn't even in the courtroom for the sentencing. She was in custody at the time on charges related to drug use, a heartbreaking detail that speaks to just how completely the murder of her daughter had dismantled her world. She later said publicly that she'd turned to substances trying to numb a pain that had no bottom. In March of 2006, a judge made it official and sentenced Joseph Peter Smith to death, telling the courtroom that Carlie, even at 11 years old, had understood exactly how hopeless her situation was, that her death had been conscious, ruthless, and deliberately carried out. Then he looked directly at Smith and told him he had forfeited the right to live freely among them. Most people who followed this case walked out of that courtroom assuming it was finally over. It wasn't, not even close. In 2016, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled, in an unrelated case, that Florida's death penalty process was unconstitutional because it let judges rather than juries make the final call and didn't require a unanimous vote. That ruling reached back and touched dozens of death row cases across the state, including Joseph Smith's. In 2018, the Florida Supreme Court dropped his death sentence entirely. It hit Carlie's family like a second blow they never saw coming. After everything, the trial, the verdict, the years of waiting, the system had found a procedural gap and walked straight through it. Prosecutors weren't finished though. They pushed back hard, filing motions to reinstate the sentence and fighting the resentencing process at every turn. And by 2020, after 2 more years of legal back and forth, Smith's death sentence was reinstated. It looked like the case was heading toward yet another chapter of hearings and delays. Carlie's father, Joe, spent that stretch writing letters to the governor and the attorney general, asking them to simply follow through on what the state had already promised his family. Then, in July of 2021, 17 years after Carlie was taken, nature settled what the courts never managed to. Joseph Peter Smith died inside a Florida prison at 55 years old, reportedly from liver cancer with complications from hepatitis C. He died without ever being executed, without the sentence ever actually being carried out. Carlie's father, Joe, didn't hold back when he heard. He said he felt relief, that it had been a long time coming, and that the system had failed to carry out what it promised. That in the end, nature had done what the courts couldn't. And to really understand that anger, you have to go back to something that happened 8 days before Carlie was even taken. Joseph Smith had been on probation. He'd violated it more than once. At one point, he was even found unconscious in a parking lot with cocaine on him. Under the terms of his agreement, that should have sent him back to prison for 5 years. Instead, he was reclassified onto a lighter form of probation that kept him free. 8 days later, Carlie Brucia was gone. Joe reached out to a Florida congresswoman and asked her to close that exact loophole. She introduced a bill known as Carlie's Law, standing at a press conference to say lawmakers needed to act immediately to protect children from repeat offenders who took the second chances the system gave them and used them to commit new acts of violence. A Texas representative signed on as a co-sponsor, and for a while the bill had real momentum, public support, media attention, and the full moral weight of what had happened to an 11-year-old girl behind it. But the state estimated the cost of reincarcerating people with histories like Smith's at close to $1 billion, and once that number hit the legislature floor, the momentum stalled completely. The bill died without ever coming to a vote. Joe called it exactly what it was, putting a price tag on his daughter's life. A promise to reintroduce the bill in a broader form was made publicly and never kept. Carlie's Law, the one piece of legislation that might have carried her name forward, simply disappeared into the machinery of American politics. After Smith's death, investigators also confirmed something that had lingered for years in the background of this case. He'd long been considered a suspect in a separate, unsolved 2000 murder, a 25-year-old woman named Tara Riley, found dead in a retention pond behind a Walmart. John Smith, who'd actually known Tara personally, having worked with her, told reporters he was convinced his brother was responsible, that Tara had rejected him before her death, and that in his opinion the humiliation had become the motive. He said he'd hoped the case would finally be solved before Joseph died. It wasn't. Smith died without ever being charged in connection with Tara Riley's murder, and her case remains officially unsolved to this day. John carried the weight of all of it in his own complicated way, right up until the very end. He was the one who testified against his own brother, who led police to Carlie's body, who made the impossible choice to tell the truth even knowing exactly what it would do to what was left of his family. He also admitted something afterward that still raises uncomfortable questions. After leaving the police station that first night, he'd driven out to the location Joseph had described himself, not to call it in, but to see if any part of his brother's story was even true. He said if he'd found Carlie alive, his plan had been to free her, give her some money, take a photograph, sell it to the media, and use that money to hire Joseph a good lawyer. It's one of the strangest admissions in the entire case, and it never got a clean explanation. After Joseph died, John said something quietly devastating in a single sentence. He said his brother never truly confessed, never took real responsibility, died without ever saying the words out loud. And then John said simply that his brother died a coward. The damage moved outward from there, the way it always does. Carlie's grandmother reportedly never recovered from the grief. Her grandfather eventually left the country and moved to Europe, where he later passed away too. One child, gone in seconds from a car wash parking lot, and the ripple touched nearly everyone it reached, reshaping lives that had nothing to do with that Sunday evening except loving the same little girl. In Sarasota, a small memorial garden grew up near the church where Carlie's body was found, tended for years by volunteers and family friends who never fully knew her but couldn't quite let her go either. Every February, the community still gathers there, still ties ribbons, still teaches their own kids a hard lesson none of them ever wanted to have to teach. The church has run child safety rallies in her memory for years, trying to turn a tragedy nobody could undo into something that might protect the next kid. A caretaker who tends the grounds says he thinks about Carlie more than most people passing through ever would, and that the small patch of ground where she was found has become, in its own quiet way, a place people go simply to sit with what happened rather than to forget it. Carlie Brucia should have graduated middle school. She should have gone to high school dances and figured out who she wanted to become. She was 11 years old, and she'd barely gotten started. Thousands of strangers who never met her still showed up to search for her, still held candles outside a church in the dark, because somehow they felt like they knew her too. Her father still says the same thing whenever he's asked about her, all these years later, that her photographs are all over the house, that she's in every conversation at their dinner table, not a case file, not a headline, just their daughter, still very much a part of their family. Take a moment with that, because here's the question worth sitting with. Joseph Smith violated his probation and was let back onto the streets just 8 days before he took Carlie, and the law meant to close that gap never even made it to a vote. That's not really a story about one broken man. It's a story about a system that had every chance to stop him before that Sunday evening ever happened, and didn't. Do you think a case like this one actually changes how the system operates, or does it just fade once the headlines move on? If this story stayed with you the way it stayed with us, hit like, subscribe for more cases like this one, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from tonight. We'll see you in the next one.